everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be taking a look at something that's, well, pretty much driven the world as we know it.
I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, cars. We've got a great collection of articles and research all about them, but this isn't just going to be your typical, car talk.
Right?
This deep dive goes way beyond just how they work.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about where the word car even comes from, uncovering some surprising inventors that came before, like the big names everyone knows,
Absolutely.
and exploring how mass production not only changed cars, but industry as a whole. So buckle up, because even if you think you're a total car expert, I guarantee you'll learn some new stuff today.
It's amazing how something we see and use every day can have a history that most people just don't know about.
Totally.
Like, take the word car, for example.
Yeah.
It's such a simple word, right?
Yeah.
But its roots are, well, they're surprisingly ancient.
Oh, okay. Now you've got me curious. What's the story there?
Well, it actually comes from the Gaulish word karos, meaning chariot.
Chariot. So we're talking way back in time. Horse-drawn carriages, not exactly the image that comes to mind when I hear car today.
Exactly. It's funny how language changes over time, right?
Yeah.
Where it really shows how technology and culture are all kind of intertwined.
Yeah.
So car originally meant any horse-drawn vehicle with wheels. It wasn't until much later that the meaning narrowed down to just the self-propelled vehicles we know today. But even then, we still see those echoes from the past, like horseless carriage.
Right.
Which is kind of a fun term, I think.
I like that one. What about automobile? That one always sounded a bit more, I don't know, sophisticated maybe.
Yeah, automobile. That one's a bit of a linguistic hybrid, actually.
Oh.
It combines the Greek word autos, meaning self, with the Latin mobilis for movable. So it literally means self-moving, which, well, that's pretty accurate.
Makes sense. All right, but before we get too lost in the world of words, let's talk about, the inventors, the people who actually made these things. Everyone always thinks of Carl Benz, right?
Of course. The Benz patent motor wagon, that's the one everyone pictures. I mean, it was a game changer. It was the first real modern car designed for, everyday use back in 1886. But the story of self-propelled vehicles goes back even further than that. There were all sorts of individuals, real pioneers who were tinkering and experimenting long before Benz came along.
So who are these unsung heroes of car history? You gotta give me some names.
Okay, picture this. It's 1769. This guy, Nicholas Joseph Cugnaud, he unveils this massive steam-powered tricycle. Now, it wasn't pretty and it could barely go a few miles an hour, but it was a major milestone, a human-made vehicle moving completely under its own power.
Steam-powered tricycle.
Right.
I'm having trouble picturing that.
I think it was definitely more about function than fashion. But you know what's really amazing? Even Cugnaud's invention wasn't the first attempt. Decades earlier, in 1672, this Jesuit missionary named Ferdinand Verbiest,
Okay.
he designed a steam-powered toy carriage, believe it or not.
A toy. For who?
For the Chinese emperor.
No way.
Yeah. So you can see the idea of building self-propelled machines has been around for centuries. These early pioneers, they may not have built cars that we'd recognize today,
Right.
but they were setting the stage.
They were the foundation. Yeah.
They were proving that self-propelled vehicles were possible, paving the way for everything that came after. Mass production, the transformation of transportation.
Yeah.
Really, the transformation of society.
Wow. So speaking of mass production, we can't talk about cars without talking about Henry Ford.
Of course not. When you think mass production, you think Ford.
Yeah.
Now, the Ford Model T, it wasn't the very first mass-produced car, but it was the one that made cars affordable, made them something everyone could own.
Yeah. It's crazy how that one car changed everything. I always loved that story about the Model T only being available in black.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
It wasn't about style or anything, right? It was just pure efficiency.
Yeah.
Black paint dried the fastest on the assembly line.
Exactly. And that focus on efficiency, that was Ford's genius.
Yeah.
He took the assembly line, something that Ransom Olds had pioneered earlier, and he just revolutionized it.
Yeah.
And that revolutionized not just car manufacturing, but I mean industrial production as a whole.
Wow. So Ford took us from the era of, inventors tinkering in their workshops to the age of mass production. But his influence wasn't just limited to cars, was it?
No, not at all.
I mean, think about it. Ford's emphasis on high wages, high efficiency, what we call Fordism today,
Right.
that had a massive impact on labor, consumerism, basically the entire industrial landscape. Crazy how one person's vision can have that kind of ripple effect.
It's incredible, isn't it?
But the story doesn't end with Ford, right? I mean, what about electric vehicles? We tend to think of those as a recent thing, but weren't they around way back then, too?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Electric cars, they weren't just some 21st century invention. They were actually right there alongside steam and gasoline cars in those very early days. It's just, history took a few twists and turns.
So why do we think of them as such a new thing, then?
Well, I think partly it's because those early electric cars, they had some limitations.
Okay, yeah. Range and things like that.
Exactly. Range, speed, and the infrastructure just wasn't there to support them. There weren't charging stations on every corner like we have today.
Makes sense.
And then, of course, we discovered all that oil. The internal combustion engine, that took center stage for a long time. Electric kind of faded into the background.
So they were always there, lurking in the shadows, just waiting for their moment to come back.
Exactly.
And now, of course, that moment has arrived. Electric vehicles are everywhere. What do you think caused that resurgence?
I mean, there are a few factors, I think. Definitely growing awareness of, climate change. People are a lot more conscious of the environmental impact of gas cars. Plus, battery technologies come a long way. Batteries are much better than they used to be. And of course, governments are starting to offer incentives for people to buy electric, which helps a lot. And you can't underestimate the impact of a car like the Nissan Leaf, which came out in 2011. That showed people that an electric car could be stylish,
Yeah.
practical.
Not just some weird science experiment.
Exactly. That was a big turning point.
Yeah. And now you've got everything. Sleek sedans, powerful SUVs.
Mhm.
It's clear electric is here to stay. But we've got to think beyond just the cars themselves.
Right.
If we're really going to move away from fossil fuels, we need to think about the whole ecosystem, the infrastructure, and everything else that goes along with it.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we need to build out a vast network of charging stations if we want everyone to be able to charge their cars easily.
Makes sense.
And then there's the question of where all those batteries are going to come from. We need to make sure we're sourcing the materials ethically and sustainably. It's a big challenge.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated than just like swapping out gas stations for charging stations. But the environmental benefits are undeniable.
Absolutely.
And it's not just electric cars, right? We've got hydrogen fuel cells.
Right.
We've got wireless charging. All sorts of exciting new technologies are on the horizon.
It's a really exciting time to be following this.
Yeah. Okay, but before we get too lost in the future, let's take a step back for a minute
Okay.
and think about how cars have actually shaped our culture. They've gone way beyond just being a way to get around, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, cars have had a profound impact on our culture. They influence how we interact with each other, how our cities are designed. They're symbols of status, of freedom, even of romance. It's amazing to think about, really.
I know. It's like this hunk of metal has somehow become this powerful cultural force.
It really has.
Like, think about the 1920s. Cars gave young couples this newfound sense of privacy.
Oh, yeah.
Freedom from, the watchful eyes of chaperones. It seems like a small thing, but it had a huge impact on social norms.
It did. It's a great example of how technological innovations, they can have these unintended social consequences. The car, its purpose was to provide personal mobility, but it ended up changing courtship rituals.
Wow.
It really, in a way, helped shape modern dating as we know it.
It's a good reminder that technology doesn't exist in a vacuum.
No, it doesn't.
It's constantly interacting with society, shaping it in ways we can't always predict. But for all the good that cars have done, we can't ignore the downsides, can we?
Of course not.
They've contributed to pollution, traffic, even health issues.
Mm.
We have to acknowledge that dark side of car culture.
You're right. It's important to be realistic. For all its benefits, the automobile has also brought about significant challenges.
Right.
I mean, take traffic congestion. In cities all over the world, rush hour is a nightmare. People are stuck in their cars for hours every day, and that affects everything.
I mean, it's not just about being late to work, right? It's a drain on productivity, it's stressful, it adds to air pollution. It's a big deal.
It really is. And then, of course, there's the environmental impact. Cars and vans, I mean, they're responsible for a big chunk of global CO2 emissions. And that's a major contributor to climate change.
Yeah, and that's something we can't just ignore.
No, we can't. Switching to electric cars is definitely a step in the right direction, but it's not the whole solution. We need to rethink how much we depend on cars in general.
Right, maybe we need to look at alternative modes of transportation.
Exactly. Public transit, cycling, walking, all those things need to be part of the solution.
It's about creating a system that's more balanced, more sustainable. But even as we're tackling these big challenges, the innovation in the automotive world just keeps going. I mean, safety has come a long way since those early days.
It really has.
We've got seat belts, airbags, crumple zones, now all these advanced driver assistance systems. Cars are so much safer for the people inside them. But sometimes I wonder if that focus on occupant safety has come at the expense of people outside the car, you know?
That's an excellent point, and it's something that doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, we've done a great job protecting the people inside the car, but we haven't always paid enough attention to the safety of pedestrians, cyclists, other vulnerable road users.
Yeah. If we're really going to make transportation safe, it's got to be safe for everyone, not just people in cars.
Absolutely. It's about creating a safe system for everyone.
Exactly. And that brings us to maybe the biggest change coming to the world of cars: autonomous vehicles. Driverless cars, they're not science fiction anymore, are they?
No, they're not.
They're becoming a reality. But driverless cars, that's a whole other can of worms, isn't it?
It is. I mean, think about it. Cars that drive themselves, it's a complete transformation of transportation.
Right.
And it raises a whole new set of questions and challenges.
I know. Like, think about jobs. What happens to all the truck drivers, taxi drivers, all the people whose jobs involve driving?
Right.
That's a huge issue. And then there's the ethical side of it. How do you program a car to make life or death decisions? What happens in an accident? It gets pretty complicated.
It does. We're talking about profound changes to society, and we need to be having those conversations now.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already. We've gone from chariots to steam-powered tricycles to mass production to electric cars to autonomous vehicles. It's amazing to see how far we've come.
It really is.
But as we move towards this driverless future, we need to be asking ourselves some tough questions, and we need to make sure that the future of transportation is one that benefits everyone. So let's take a closer look at autonomous vehicles. What are some of the specific challenges and opportunities that come along with them?
All right, well, let's start with, so where were we? Oh, yeah, autonomous vehicles. It's safe to say they're a pretty monumental shift in how we think about transportation.
Yeah.
This isn't just like a little upgrade.
Right.
This is a whole paradigm shift. And who knows the kind of implications it'll have.
It really is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Cars that can just like drive themselves. They can navigate traffic, make decisions on the fly, and, take you wherever you need to go without you having to do anything. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It really is. But the crazy thing is, they're already here. I mean, you've got companies like Waymo and Cruise.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
They're already running these robotaxi services in a few cities. And the technology is just getting better and better, faster and faster.
I've seen some of the videos, those self-driving taxis navigating busy streets. It's impressive, but I gotta be honest, it also makes me a little nervous.
I get that.
As a passenger, how do you even begin to trust a machine to make decisions that could affect your safety?
Yeah. Trust is a big thing with autonomous vehicles.
Right.
It's not just about trusting the technology, It's about trusting the companies that are building these things, the regulations, the whole infrastructure that supports them. We have to be able to trust all of that.
So it's not just a tech problem to solve.
Right.
It's social, it's psychological. People need to feel comfortable, confident before they're going to let a machine take the wheel.
Exactly. And, that comfort level, it's going to be different for everyone.
Of course, yeah.
Some people, they jump at the chance to try new tech. Others are more hesitant. They want to see how things play out first.
Right, right. And even if we get past all that, there's still so much to figure out on the technical side, isn't there?
Oh, for sure.
These cars need to be able to handle anything, right? Rain, snow, fog, traffic jams, unexpected obstacles. The complexity of it all, it's kind of overwhelming when you think about it.
It's a huge undertaking. You need incredibly sophisticated algorithms, powerful sensors, and then just tons and tons of data to train those algorithms. And it's not just about recognizing objects. It's about predicting what other drivers, cyclists, pedestrians are going to do.
And people can be unpredictable.
Exactly. It's a tough nut to crack.
And then there's the whole ethical side of things. Like, what about those situations where the car has to make a decision that could potentially harm a human? I've heard a lot about that trolley problem in the context of driverless cars. How do you program a car to make those kinds of choices, life or death choices, especially when there might not be a good outcome no matter what?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest ethical dilemmas facing this whole field. There's no easy answer. Should the car prioritize the safety of the passengers, even if it means harming a pedestrian? Or should it prioritize the greater good, even if it means risking the lives of the people inside? These are incredibly complex questions that, even humans struggle with, let alone machines.
It makes you realize that technology sometimes it raises more questions than it answers.
It does.
But even setting aside the technical and ethical challenges, there are also, like, massive societal implications. How are driverless cars going to change our cities, our jobs, our whole way of life, really?
Yeah, the potential impacts are huge.
Okay, like jobs, for example. The transportation industry. That employs millions of people. Truck drivers, taxi drivers, delivery drivers, all those jobs could be automated.
Right.
So what happens to all those people? We can't just leave them behind.
No, absolutely not. It's a critical issue. And honestly, policymakers and industry leaders need to start addressing it now.
Yeah.
We need to invest in retraining programs, create new opportunities in related fields, and we have to be open to new ideas, like maybe even something like universal basic income. We have to make sure that everyone benefits from this transition, not just a few.
Okay, so jobs are one thing, but what about our cities themselves? How will those change? I mean, if cars can drive themselves, do we still need all these parking lots? Will the suburbs just keep sprawling outwards because commuting is easier? Will our streets be safer for pedestrians, or will they just be, like, overrun with driverless cars?
All good questions. Urban planners are already thinking about all of this. Some people think we'll move towards more compact, walkable cities where everyone shares these autonomous vehicles. Others worry about more sprawl, more congestion, because it's so easy to just hop in a driverless car and go.
So it could go either way, huh?
It really could. It all comes down to what we prioritize as a society. Do we want to build sustainable, walkable communities? Or do we just want to make it as easy as possible for people to get around in their own little pods?
It's like the technology itself is neutral. It's how we choose to use it that really matters.
Exactly. The future of our cities, it's not set in stone. It's something we have to shape.
So in a way, autonomous vehicles give us this chance to, like, rethink our whole relationship with transportation, right? We can reimagine what our cities could be. But like any big technological shift, there are going to be winners and losers.
For sure.
So how do we make sure that everyone benefits? And how do we minimize the negative impacts?
Well, equity has to be a top priority.
Right.
We can't have a system where only rich people or people who are really tech savvy get to benefit. We have to make sure these autonomous vehicles are accessible to everyone, regardless of their income or where they live.
So affordability is a big one.
Absolutely. And we also have to consider the needs of people with disabilities, older adults, anyone who might face unique challenges in this new world.
Yeah, it's about making sure everyone is included.
Right. And that's a big part of building a transportation system that's truly equitable. But even if we figure out all those things, there's still this bigger question looming out there.
Which is?
What does it mean to give up control to a machine?
Well,
I mean, for some people, driving is stressful, frustrating. For others, it's liberating. It's a way to express their individuality. So how will autonomous vehicles change how we see ourselves, how we relate to the world around us? That's a deep question, I think.
it's almost like we're not just changing our technology. We're changing ourselves. We're changing how we think about what it means to be human.
Exactly. We're redefining how we move through the world, and the implications go way beyond just transportation.
Wow. So this is about more than just cars, huh?
Oh, yeah. It's about, like, our psychology, our emotions. We're entering uncharted territory here.
It's both exciting and a little bit scary, to be honest.
It is. But one thing's for sure, the journey towards this autonomous future, it's going to be fascinating. And it's a journey we're all taking together.
We are. So what do we do? How do we make sure this all goes in the right direction?
I think the most important thing is to talk about it, openly and honestly. We need to consider everyone's perspective. And we have to work together to build a future that's both innovative and fair.
And that's a future worth fighting for.
Absolutely.
You know, it's kind of wild to think about how far we've come. I mean, from those, like, clunky steam-powered things to the cars we have today. And now, autonomous vehicles. It's like a whole other level.
It really shows you how relentless innovation can be.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that the future of transportation, it's not just about having the coolest new tech.
Right.
It's about creating a system that actually works.
Yeah.
One that's sustainable, fair, and, actually meets everyone's needs.
I like that. Works for everyone. So what does that look like, practically speaking? What are some of the things we need to think about as we, shape the future of how we get around?
Well, first off, I think we've got to move past this idea that everything has to revolve around cars.
Yeah.
We've built our cities for cars, and often it feels like it's at the expense of people walking, biking, or taking public transit. If we want a system that's truly sustainable and equitable, We need to take a more balanced approach.
So it's not just about making cars better or fancier or, driverless.
Right.
It's about figuring out how all these different ways of getting around can work together.
Exactly. Imagine a city where you can walk or bike to most places easily. A city with a public transit system that's actually reliable and efficient. And when you need it, you can just hop in a shared autonomous vehicle.
Yeah.
Streets designed for people, not just for cars.
That sounds pretty great. A city where getting around isn't a hassle, it's actually enjoyable.
Right.
But to get there, we need to rethink some things. Like, do we all really need to own a car? Especially with these autonomous vehicles coming into the picture.
Yeah, that's a big one. Car ownership, it might not be as necessary in the future.
Right.
Think about it. If you can easily access a shared driverless car whenever you need one, owning your own car might become more of a luxury than a necessity.
That's an interesting way to think about it. And just imagine all that space that's taken up by parking lots. What could we do with all that?
I know.
Yeah.
Parks, housing, community gardens. The possibilities are kind of endless.
It could really change the look and feel of our cities, make them more livable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we've got to make sure that everyone has access to these shared mobility options,
Yeah.
not just the wealthy or the people who live in certain areas.
Right. Equity, that's got to be a top priority.
It has to be.
Yeah.
We can't create a system that only benefits certain groups of people. And we also need to think about the people whose jobs might be affected by all of this.
Mm-hmm.
All those drivers who might be displaced as autonomous vehicles become more common. We've got to make sure they have support, retraining opportunities, things like that.
We can't just leave people behind as technology advances.
Exactly. But beyond all that, all those practical considerations, I think there's a deeper question here.
Oh.
As we rely more and more on technology, on machines that can think for us, what does it even mean to be human?
Whoa. That's a big one.
It is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the relationship between humans and technology has always been complex. Technology can empower us, it can free up our time, and let us do things we never could before, but it can also make us dependent, make us feel isolated. So where's the balance? How do we make sure technology serves us and doesn't, take over?
I don't know if there are any easy answers, but it's definitely something we need to be thinking about.
We have to be mindful of how technology shapes not just our world, but also our minds and our values.
Yeah.
The future, it's not something that just happens to us. It's a reflection of the choices that we make.
So what have we learned from this deep dive? I think the big takeaway for me is that the future of transportation, the future in general, it's not set in stone. It's something we're creating right now through the decisions we make every day. And yeah, there are definitely challenges ahead, but there are also amazing opportunities to create a world where transportation connects people, it strengthens our communities, and it makes our lives better.
Well said. It's a journey full of possibilities, and it's up to all of us to make sure it leads to a good place.
And that's a perfect place to wrap things up. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the world of cars and transportation with us, and we'll see you next time.